The fluorescent beer signs cast an amber glow across Sullivan's bar as Marcus Reeves sat motionless in the corner booth, his calloused fingers wrapped around a chipped ceramic mug of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. The Friday night crowd was loud, celebrating, alive. He was a ghost among them. His grey-streaked hair fell past his shoulders, unwashed, tangled. His beard, thick with white patches, obscured most of his face except for those pale blue eyes that seemed to look through walls, through time, through the laughter around him. The scar cutting from his left eyebrow to his temple caught the light every time he shifted. No one looked at him directly. They never did. Blake Morrison noticed him immediately. Blake always noticed homeless people, especially ones who dared to sit in his bar wearing torn military surplus jackets, like they'd earned them. Blake was 28, built like he spent more time at the gym than he ever had in actual combat, and he had something to prove to everyone in this room. His Marine Corps eagle tattoo flexed on his bicep as he crossed his arms, staring at Marcus from behind the bar where he worked security. 2 years in the Corps before a dishonorable discharge wasn't something he advertised, but the eagle tattoo was permanent, and so was his resentment toward anyone who made him feel less than. "Hey, old man," Blake called out, loud enough that conversations started to die down. "You planning on ordering something, or you just here to stink up the place?" Marcus didn't respond. He'd learned years ago that responding only made it worse. His eyes stayed fixed on the black coffee, on the tiny ripples from the base of the jukebox in the corner. Blake walked closer, his boots heavy on the wooden floor. "I'm talking to you, homeless guy. You deaf or just stupid?" Tom Sullivan, the bar's owner, a 67-year-old Gulf War veteran with kind eyes and a slight limp, stepped forward from behind the counter. "Blake, leave him alone. He's not bothering anyone. I gave him that coffee." "Yeah, and that's the problem, Tom." Blake's voice rose, theatrical now, playing to the crowd. "Look at him. He's wearing a torn Marine jacket he probably pulled out of a dumpster, sitting in a military bar like he belongs here. It's disrespectful to actual veterans." Marcus's jaw tightened, but he didn't look up. Under the table, his hands curled into fists, then slowly released. Breathe, count, survive. The same mantra he'd used for 9 years. "Hey, everyone," Blake shouted now, spreading his arms wide, a showman in his element. "We got a hero here. A real American hero who can't even afford soap." Some people laughed. Nervous, uncomfortable laughter, but laughter nonetheless. Others looked away, pretending they hadn't heard. A few young SEALs in civilian clothes at a back table glanced over with mild curiosity before returning to their beers. Blake was standing right over Marcus now, close enough that Marcus could smell his cologne, his gym sweat, his desperation to be seen. "I'm betting you never even made it through basic training, did you? What war did you fight in, old man? The war against taking a shower?" Marcus's breathing remained steady. In his mind, he was somewhere else. Fallujah, 2006. Dust in his throat, radio static, the screams of his team. He forced himself back to the present. The coffee was cold. The bar smelled like buffalo wings and beer. Blake was still talking. "You stink so bad you're offending real veterans in here. Get out before I drag you out myself." Lieutenant Sarah Chen, a 30-year-old Navy officer in civilian clothes sitting 3 tables away, felt her stomach turn. She'd seen this before. Bullies always picked the silent ones, the ones who wouldn't fight back. She started to stand, but her friend grabbed her wrist. "Don't get involved, Sarah. Not your business." Blake leaned down now, his face inches from Marcus's. "You wearing that military jacket to scam people, to beg for money. That's stolen valor, you know that? That's a crime." Tom Sullivan stepped around the bar. "Blake, I'm warning you." "Warning me?" Blake spun around. "Tom, you're too soft. This guy is taking advantage of your kindness. He's a fake, a fraud." He turned back to Marcus, his voice dripping with contempt. "Since you're pretending to be military, why don't you tell everyone your rank, your unit? Hell, tell us your call sign. Every real operator has a call sign, right?" He laughed, harsh and cold. "What was yours? Trash can? Dumpster? Hobo one?" The door to Sullivan's bar opened. The November wind rushed in, carrying the scent of rain and diesel fuel from the street. A man in his late 40s stepped inside, broad-shouldered, moving with the kind of controlled precision that comes from decades of training. He wore a leather jacket, jeans, but something in his posture screamed military. His eyes swept the room, a habit that never dies, and landed on the scene unfolding in the corner. His name was James Patterson. His call sign was Hawk. He was a commander in SEAL Team 3, and he'd just come from a classified briefing at Naval Base Coronado. Blake didn't notice him. He was too focused on his performance, on the laughter he was generating, on the power he felt standing over this broken man in the corner. "Come on, homeless hero. Tell us your call sign. We're all waiting." Marcus Reeves lifted his head for the first time. His pale blue eyes met Blake's, and for just a moment, Blake felt something cold crawl up his spine. There was something in those eyes, something that didn't belong in a homeless man. Something ancient and dangerous and utterly calm. Marcus's voice was low, rough from years of silence and cold nights under bridges, but it carried through the bar like a blade cutting through water. "Phantom, SEAL Team 6, 2003 to 2007. If you're watching this story from anywhere in the world, we'd love to know where you're joining us from. Drop a comment below telling us your city or country. And if stories like this one about courage, sacrifice, and second chances speak to you, please consider subscribing to our channel. Your support helps us share more incredible true stories that honor the forgotten heroes among us. Now let's continue. Blake Morrison laughed. It was a big, exaggerated laugh designed to humiliate. "Right, and I'm Captain America, SEAL Team 6. You?" He turned to the crowd, arms spread wide. "Did you hear that? This bum thinks he's a Navy SEAL." But no one was laughing anymore, because Commander James Patterson had gone completely still near the entrance, his face drained of color, his eyes locked on Marcus like he was seeing a ghost rise from the dead. "Phantom," Patterson whispered, barely audible, then louder, his voice cracking. "Phantom." 9 years earlier, Marcus Reeves had been a different man, 30 pounds heavier, clean-shaven, eyes sharp and clear. He'd been part of an elite unit that didn't officially exist, running operations in Iraq that would never be declassified. His specialty was deep infiltration, going into hostile territory for weeks at a time with zero support, gathering intelligence, identifying targets, becoming invisible. They called him Phantom because he could disappear into enemy cities like smoke and reappear exactly when and where he was needed. In Fallujah, during the heaviest urban combat of the Iraq War, he'd spent 11 days behind enemy lines after his extraction point was compromised. 11 days with no food, no water resupply, no communication, moving through buildings filled with insurgents, marking targets and slowly, methodically, guiding a surrounded Marine platoon to safety. 47 men made it out alive because of him. When he finally emerged, he weighed 30 pounds less, his feet were bleeding through his boots, and he hadn't slept in 4 days. They gave him a Navy Cross in a ceremony that never happened, in a room with no windows, attended by men whose names were redacted from every document. But that was before Ramadi, before Operation Red Shadow in 2007, before the ambush that killed his entire team and left him alive, hidden in a collapsed building for 16 hours, listening to his brothers die over the radio while he bled from shrapnel wounds and couldn't move, couldn't help, couldn't do anything but survive. When they finally extracted him, he was the only one who came home. 6 men went in. 1 came out. The guilt was a physical weight, crushing him slowly from the inside. The Navy offered him counseling, a new identity, a quiet discharge with honors. He refused it all. He wanted to disappear, not into enemy territory this time, but into nothingness. So he did. He walked away from his apartment, his bank account, his life. He became Phantom in a different way, a ghost haunting the streets of San Diego, sleeping under the Roosevelt Bridge, carrying everything he owned in a green military backpack. Inside that backpack, wrapped in plastic, was a photograph. 6 men in combat gear, arms around each other, grinning like they were invincible. Marcus was in the center, younger, whole. On the back of the photo, 6 names were written in permanent marker. 5 of them had lines drawn through them. Only his remained. He looked at that photo every night before he closed his eyes, a ritual of remembrance and punishment. Also in the backpack, a broken tactical radio from Ramadi. He'd tried to fix it 1,000 times, as if fixing the radio could somehow go back in time and change what happened. Let him call for help sooner, save them. It never worked. And sewn into the inside lining of the backpack, invisible unless you knew where to look, was his SEAL Team 6 patch. He never showed it to anyone. It was a reminder of who he'd been and a reminder of why he didn't deserve to be that person anymore. For 9 years, he'd survived on the streets. He never begged. He never stole. When other homeless people were harassed, he stepped in quietly, using his presence more than his words. When someone needed food, he shared what little he had. He helped an elderly homeless woman named Rosa find shelter during last winter's storms. He'd scared off a group of teenagers who were beating a homeless veteran named Kenny just for fun. He did these things not for recognition, but because some part of him, deep inside, still operated on the code he'd learned. Leave no one behind. Protect those who can't protect themselves. It was all he had left. Marcus had come to Sullivan's bar for the first time 3 months ago. It was raining, brutal and cold, and Tom Sullivan had opened the door and wordlessly handed him a towel and a cup of coffee. No questions, no judgment, just kindness. Marcus came back every Friday, always sitting in the same corner booth, always drinking the same coffee, always silent. Tom never asked for money. He was a Gulf War veteran himself, and he recognized something in Marcus's eyes, pain, loss, the kind that doesn't heal with time. But Blake Morrison had started working security at Sullivan's 2 months ago, and he hated Marcus from the first moment he saw him. To Blake, homeless people were failures, embarrassments, reminders of what happens when you're weak, and Marcus, sitting there every week in that torn military jacket, felt like a personal insult. So tonight, Blake decided to do something about it. He was going to expose this fraud, humiliate him, and get him banned from the bar forever. He had no idea what he'd just unleashed. Commander Patterson moved through the crowd like a man in a trance, his eyes never leaving Marcus. The 4 young SEALs at the back table noticed their commander's expression and immediately stood at attention, their conversation dying mid-sentence. Something was wrong. Patterson never looked like this. Never lost his composure. Blake was still laughing, still performing, oblivious to the shift in the room's atmosphere. SEAL Team 6, that's Rich. What's next? You gonna tell us you killed Bin Laden too? Patterson reached the corner booth. His hands were shaking. Phantom, he said again, his voice breaking. Sir, is it really you? Marcus looked up at Patterson, and for a moment his expression softened with something like recognition, something like pain. Hawk, he said quietly. Patterson's knees buckled. He caught himself on the table, his eyes filling with tears. We thought you were dead. We all thought you were dead. His hand rose in a slow, trembling salute. Sir, we thought we'd lost you. What Marcus Reeves didn't know, sitting in that bar on that Friday night, was that Commander Patterson had been a young lieutenant during Operation Red Shadow. He hadn't been on the mission that went bad, but he'd been in the operations center when the distress calls came through. He'd listened to the radio chatter, the screams, the silence. He'd been there when they declared Phantom KIA, killed in action, body unrecoverable. He'd attended the classified memorial service where they honored 6 names, including Marcus Reeves. For 18 years, Patterson had carried the weight of that night, wondering if they could have done something different, sent backup faster, changed the outcome. And now, the man he'd mourned was sitting in front of him, alive, homeless, and looking like he wished he wasn't. The bar had gone completely silent. Blake's laughter had died in his throat. He stood frozen, his face pale, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Lieutenant Sarah Chen had both hands pressed to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. The 4 young SEALs were at attention, staring at Marcus with expressions of shock and awe. Tom Sullivan had come around the bar, his eyes wide, his own hand moving toward a salute before he caught himself. Blake finally found his voice high-pitched and desperate. I didn't know. How was I supposed to? Patterson spun on him with a fury that made Blake stumble backward. Didn't know what? Didn't know you should treat veterans with respect? Didn't know you shouldn't humiliate people? Patterson's voice was shaking with rage. This man saved 47 Marines in Fallujah. He infiltrated enemy territory alone for 11 days with no support, no backup, no help. And he guided an entire platoon to safety. He is a living legend in the SEAL community. His operations are still classified. His name is spoken in briefings as the standard for what it means to be a SEAL. Blake was backing up toward the door, his face red, his eyes darting for an escape. I thought he was... You thought he was what? Patterson stepped forward. Worthless? Disposable? Not worth your basic human decency? Tom Sullivan moved between them, his voice calm but firm. Blake, you're fired. Get out of my bar, now. Tom, come on. I didn't know he was... Doesn't matter if he was a SEAL or not, Tom said, his voice hardening. The way you treated him was wrong. Period. Get out. But Patterson wasn't done. He pulled out his phone, his fingers moving quickly. I'm calling Naval Base Coronado right now. I'm reporting your conduct. If you ever worked in any military capacity, you're done. If you ever tried to get a job at any military installation, any defense contractor, any veteran organization, you're blacklisted. I'm making sure of it personally. Blake's face crumbled. He looked around the room, searching for sympathy, for support, for anything. He found only disgust. One of the young SEALs near the door stepped aside, but as Blake passed, the SEAL spit on the ground in front of him. Another veteran sitting at the bar turned his back deliberately. Sarah Chen stared at him with such contempt that Blake physically flinched. He pushed through the door and disappeared into the November night, humiliated and destroyed. Marcus sat perfectly still through all of it, his hands folded on the table, his eyes distant. This was his nightmare. Not the confrontation, not Blake's cruelty, that he could handle. That was easy. What terrified him was this, the attention, the recognition, the expectation that would follow. He'd spent 9 years invisible, and now he was exposed. Patterson was still standing there, tears on his face, looking at Marcus like he was seeing a miracle. The entire bar was staring, waiting, expecting him to be the hero they remembered, the legend Patterson had described. But Marcus didn't feel like a hero. He felt like a fraud. He felt like the man who'd survived when his brothers died, who'd hidden in rubble while they bled out, calling his name over the radio. Sir? Patterson said softly, pulling up a chair and sitting across from Marcus without asking permission. Sir, where have you been? Why didn't you come back? We would have helped you. The teams would have done anything. Marcus's voice was barely a whisper. I couldn't come back. Ramadi wasn't your fault. I survived. They didn't. You survived because you're the best operator I've ever seen. You survived because that's what you do. That's why they sent you. Patterson leaned forward, his voice urgent. Sir, you saved 47 people. You ran over 30 missions with a perfect success rate. You trained half the operators currently active. Your legacy isn't Ramadi. Your legacy is every person you saved, every mission you completed, every operator who learned from you. What Hawk Patterson couldn't know in that moment was that he was reaching into a wound that had been open and bleeding for 9 years. Every word he spoke with admiration was a knife in Marcus's gut. Every compliment was an accusation. Saved 47 people, but couldn't save 6. Perfect success rate except for the one time it mattered most. Trained operators who all went home to their families, while Marcus's team went home in boxes. The math didn't balance. It never would. Tom Sullivan approached slowly, carefully, carrying a fresh cup of coffee and a plate of food. He set them both in front of Marcus without a word. Marcus stared at the food, a burger and fries, steam rising from the plate. His stomach twisted. He couldn't remember the last time someone had given him hot food without expecting something in return. Lieutenant Sarah Chen had approached as well, standing a respectful distance away. Sir, she said, and her voice was thick with emotion. I needed to say thank you. My brother was in that platoon in Fallujah, the one you saved. His name is David Chen. He's 34 now. He has 2 kids. He's alive because of you. Marcus closed his eyes. The weight of her words was crushing. Somewhere in the back of his mind he could see them, the Marines in Fallujah, young, terrified, trapped in buildings surrounded by insurgents. He remembered their faces when he'd finally reached them, moving through the darkness like a ghost, guiding them through alleys he'd mapped in his head over 11 days of surveillance. He remembered the radio operator, a kid who couldn't have been more than 22, grabbing his arm and crying. He remembered thinking, if I can just get them out, if I can just save these ones, maybe it will balance the scale. But scales don't balance, not in war, not in guilt. The 4 young SEALs from the back table had approached now, too, forming a semicircle around the booth. They stood at attention without being told to, their faces reflecting a mixture of reverence and disbelief. One of them, a lean kid with a fresh haircut and sharp eyes, spoke first. "Sir, Phantom is in our training materials. We study your Fallujah infiltration at Coronado. It's in the course as an example of perfect operational execution under impossible circumstances." Another SEAL, built like a linebacker, added, "They tell us about you, but they don't use your real name. They just call you Phantom. We thought, they said you were KIA. We all thought you died a legend." Marcus finally spoke, his voice rough. "Legends are just stories people tell when they don't know the truth." Patterson shook his head. "The truth is you're one of the best operators who ever lived, and you're sitting in a bar wearing rags because the system failed you. That's the truth, and I'm going to fix it." "Don't." Marcus's voice was firm now, an edge of command creeping back into it. "Don't make this into something it's not." "It's already something," Patterson said. "Whether you like it or not, you're here, you're alive, and I'm not walking away. I'm calling the VA. I'm getting you into treatment, real treatment, not the bureaucratic nightmare they put most veterans through. I'm talking about the private facility at Coronado where they treat active SEALs with PTSD. You're going there. Monday. I'm not asking for anything. I don't care. I'm giving it anyway." Patterson's voice softened. "Sir, you taught me something when I was a lieutenant. You told me the team takes care of its own no matter what. You said leave no one behind isn't just a motto, it's a promise. Well, sir, we left you behind. For 9 years. I'm not doing it for one more day." Tom Sullivan sat down next to Patterson, his weathered face kind. "Marcus, I knew you were military, I could see it. I didn't know you were Phantom, but I knew you were one of us. I've been giving you coffee for 3 months, waiting for you to be ready to talk." "Well, you don't have to talk. But you do have to accept help. That's the deal. You helped 47 people. You helped Rosa last winter. You helped Kenny when those kids were beating him. You've been helping everyone but yourself. So let us help you." The 4 young SEALs were murmuring among themselves, and one of them pulled out his phone. "Sir, we're setting up a fund. Our entire platoon will contribute. Housing, clothing, whatever you need." "Don't." Marcus's voice was harder now. "I don't want your money." "Too bad," the SEAL said with a slight smile. "We're doing it anyway. You can refuse to take it, but we're going to raise it, and it's going to sit in an account with your name on it until you're ready." Marcus looked around the table at these men and women who were looking at him like he mattered, like he was worth saving. It was overwhelming. For 9 years, he'd convinced himself he didn't deserve help, that his survival was punishment, not a gift. He'd built a wall around himself made of guilt and shame, and these people were trying to tear it down brick by brick. Part of him wanted to run, to disappear back under the Roosevelt Bridge where he belonged. But another part, a small part, that still remembered what it felt like to be Phantom, to be part of a team, to belong, was whispering that maybe, just maybe, he could try. Patterson stood up. "I'm making phone calls right now. By tomorrow morning, you'll have a bed in a clean facility with counselors who understand what you've been through. Tom, can he stay here tonight?" Tom nodded immediately. "I have a room upstairs. It's not much, but it's warm and clean. He can stay as long as he needs." Lieutenant Chen stepped forward. "Sir, I'd like to give you my brother's phone number. I know he'd want to thank you himself." Marcus looked down at the burger in front of him, at the coffee, at the faces surrounding him. His hands were shaking. He clenched them into fists, then slowly released them. Breathe, count, survive. But maybe surviving didn't have to mean suffering. Maybe surviving could mean living. "Okay," he said finally, so quietly that Patterson had to lean in to hear him. "Okay." The word hung in the air like a prayer. Patterson's face broke into a smile, and he put his hand on Marcus's shoulder. "Okay, that's all we need." Over the next 2 hours, Sullivan's bar transformed from a place of humiliation into something else entirely. Word spread quickly through the military community. More veterans arrived. Some had heard the story already from text messages and phone calls. Others came because they heard Phantom was real, was alive, was here. They didn't come to gawk or to ask for stories. They came to pay respects. A retired Master Chief brought a coat. A former Marine brought boots. A Navy nurse brought medical supplies and cleaned the cut on Marcus's hand he'd gotten a week ago and ignored. They sat with him, around him, not demanding anything, just being present. It was overwhelming and terrifying, and somewhere beneath the fear, it felt like coming home. Patterson spent an hour on his phone calling in favors, pulling strings, making things happen with the kind of efficiency that only military officers can manage when they're truly motivated. By 10 p.m., he had Marcus enrolled in the Coronado PTSD treatment program, with a bed ready Monday morning. He'd contacted a Navy lawyer to help sort out Marcus's legal status, his back pay, his benefits that had been frozen when he disappeared. He'd arranged for a full medical evaluation. He'd even called his own dentist to schedule an emergency appointment because he'd noticed Marcus's teeth were in bad shape from years of neglect. The 4 young SEALs had set up a crowdfunding page, and within an hour it had raised $12,000 from veterans and active service members across the country. They showed Marcus the page, the comments pouring in from people who'd heard of Phantom, who'd studied his missions, who wanted to help. Marcus stared at the screen, unable to process it. $12,000 for him, because strangers thought he was worth it. Tom Sullivan offered Marcus a job. "When you're ready," he said. "Not before. But I need someone at the bar who understands what these kids are going through, someone who's been there, someone who can spot the ones who are hurting and need help before they fall through the cracks like you did. There's no pressure, no timeline, but the job is yours when you want it." Marcus nodded, still not quite believing any of this was real. It felt like a dream, like he'd wake up under the bridge in the cold, and this would all vanish. But Patterson's hand on his shoulder was solid. The coffee was hot. The coat the Master Chief had brought smelled like laundry detergent and fit perfectly. These things were real. At 11 p.m., most of the crowd had dispersed, leaving just Patterson, Tom, Sarah Chen, and the 4 young SEALs. Marcus sat in the booth exhausted, overwhelmed, but something in his chest had loosened just slightly. Patterson sat across from him, leaning forward with his elbows on the table. "Sir, I need to tell you something," Patterson said. "In 2 weeks we have a ceremony at Naval Base Coronado. It's a memorial for fallen operators. We list names. We honor them. We make sure they're not forgotten. Your name is on that list. Has been since 2007. I'd like to remove it officially, and I'd like you to be there when we do." Marcus's breath caught. His name on a memorial wall. His family probably thought he was dead. For 9 years, he'd been dead. The thought of standing in front of that wall, of people seeing him alive, of having to face the families of his team, the men who actually died, was paralyzing. "I don't know if I can do that," Marcus said. "You don't have to decide now," Patterson said. "Just think about it. But sir, those families deserve to know you survived. Your team wouldn't want you suffering like this. They'd want you here, living, healing, being Phantom again. Not the operator, just the man." Marcus didn't answer. He couldn't. The emotions were too big, too complicated, too much for words. One of the young SEALs, the kid with the fresh haircut, cleared his throat nervously. "Sir, can I ask you something?" Marcus nodded. "When you were in Fallujah, alone for 11 days, how did you keep going? I mean, no support, no extraction, just you against an entire city. What kept you moving forward?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment, staring at his hands. Finally he spoke, his voice distant, like he was pulling the memory from somewhere deep. "I thought about the Marines who were trapped. I thought about their families, their kids, their futures. And I thought if I could just get them out, if I could just save them, then maybe I'd done something that mattered. Maybe I'd balanced the scale a little bit. But sir," the SEAL said gently, "you saved 47 people. How is that not balanced?" Marcus looked up, his eyes haunted. "Because 6 months later I couldn't save my own team, and 47 minus 6 doesn't equal anything that feels like winning." Patterson's voice was firm but compassionate. "Sir, with all due respect, that's not how this works. You don't get to erase 47 lives saved because you couldn't prevent 6 deaths in an ambush no one could have stopped. That's not balance. That's punishment. And you don't deserve to be punished. Marcus's hands were shaking again. Patterson reached across the table and gripped them, holding them steady. You don't have to believe me right now, but you will. The counselors at Coronado, they're going to help you understand that survival isn't a sin. They're going to help you forgive yourself. And we're going to be there every step of the way. Tom Sullivan stood up, his voice gentle. Marcus, it's late. Let me show you the room upstairs. You can rest. Tomorrow's going to be a big day. But tonight, just rest. Marcus stood slowly, his legs stiff from sitting, his body aching from years of sleeping on concrete. He followed Tom up a narrow staircase behind the bar to a small room with a bed, a dresser, and a window overlooking the street. It was simple, clean, warm. Tom handed him a towel, a toothbrush, shampoo, all still in packages. The bathroom's across the hall, Tom said. Take a hot shower, get some sleep. I'll be downstairs if you need anything. And Marcus? Tom paused at the door. Welcome home. When the door closed, Marcus stood in the center of the room, alone for the first time since the confrontation. He looked at the bed, at the clean sheets, at the pillow. He couldn't remember the last time he'd slept in a bed. Slowly, carefully, like he was handling something fragile, he sat down on the edge. The mattress gave slightly under his weight. It was soft, too soft. He was used to concrete, to cardboard, to the hard ground under bridges. He reached into his backpack and pulled out the photograph, the one with 6 faces. He stared at it for a long time, at the men who didn't come home, at his own face, younger and whole. I don't know if I deserve this, he whispered to the photo. But I'm going to try. For you guys, I'm going to try. He placed the photo carefully on the dresser, propped against the wall where he could see it. Then he went across the hall, locked the bathroom door, and turned on the shower. The water took a minute to heat up, and when it did, he stepped under the stream and let it pour over him. The heat was shocking, almost painful after years of cold. He watched the water at his feet turn grey with dirt, with grime, with 9 years of streets and bridges and survival. He stood there for 20 minutes, maybe longer, just letting the water wash over him. When he finally emerged, wrapped in the towel, he looked at himself in the mirror. The scar on his face, the grey hair, the hollow cheeks, the eyes that had seen too much. He looked old, broken, but somewhere under all of that, somewhere deep, was Phantom, not the operator, not the legend, just Marcus Reeves, a man who'd survived when he didn't think he could, who'd lost everything and was being offered a chance to find something again. He went back to the room, lay down on the bed, still wrapped in the towel, and closed his eyes. For the first time in 9 years, he slept without listening for threats, without one eye open, without fear. He slept deeply, dreamlessly, as if his body finally believed it was safe. Monday morning, Patterson picked him up at Sullivan's bar in his personal truck. Marcus had showered again, trimmed his beard with scissors Tom had provided, and was wearing the clean clothes the veterans had brought Friday night. He looked different, not whole yet, not healed, but different. The drive to Coronado was quiet. Patterson didn't push conversation, didn't ask questions. He just drove, steady and calm. When they arrived at the facility, a private building on the base grounds, a counselor named Dr. Reyes was waiting. She was in her 40s, former Army, with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She shook Marcus's hand firmly. Mr. Reeves, welcome. We're going to take good care of you here. This is a safe space. No judgment, no pressure. Just healing, at whatever pace you need. Marcus nodded, his throat tight. Patterson gripped his shoulder one last time. I'll check on you tomorrow, sir. You're not alone in this. And for the first time in 9 years, Marcus believed it might be true. 6 months later, Marcus Reeves stood behind the bar at Sullivan's, pouring a beer for a young veteran who'd just returned from deployment. Marcus's hair was shorter now, clean and trimmed. His beard was neat. He'd gained back 20 pounds. The haunted look in his eyes hadn't disappeared entirely, but it had softened. He was in therapy twice a week. He was on medication that helped with the nightmares. He was working, living in a small apartment a few blocks away, rebuilding a life he thought he'd lost forever. Tom had made him assistant manager. Marcus's job was exactly what Tom had described, spotting the ones who were hurting, reaching out before they fell. He'd helped 3 veterans get into treatment programs in the last 4 months. He'd talked down 2 who were considering suicide, sitting with them through the night until they agreed to get help. He was doing what he'd always done, saving people. But this time he was learning to save himself too. Every Friday night, veterans came to Sullivan's bar asking Tom the same question, quietly, respectfully. Is it true that Phantom works here? And every time Tom just smiled and nodded toward Marcus, who'd be in the back wiping down tables or restocking bottles, moving with quiet efficiency, never drawing attention to himself. Some of them approached Marcus, shook his hand, thanked him. He accepted it now, with grace if not comfort. Most just watched him from a distance, content to know that the legend was real, was alive, was here, and that if Phantom could survive, could come back from 9 years on the streets, could heal and rebuild and live again, then maybe they could too. Marcus never spoke about Fallujah unless someone asked directly, and even then his answers were brief. The past was the past. He carried it with him, always would, but it didn't define every moment anymore. He'd attended the memorial ceremony at Coronado, stood in front of the wall with his name on it, watched as they officially removed it. He'd met the families of the Marines he'd saved in Fallujah. Sarah Chen's brother David had come, brought his 2 daughters, and they'd hugged Marcus like he was family, and maybe he was. The photograph of his team still sat on his dresser at home. He still looked at it every night. But now, when he looked at those faces, he heard Patterson's voice. Your legacy isn't Ramadi. Your legacy is every person you saved. He was learning to believe it, slowly, painfully, but learning. He was learning that surviving wasn't the same as betraying, that living wasn't dishonoring the dead, that Phantom wasn't just a call sign for a warrior. It was a reminder that even when you think you've disappeared, even when you think you're gone, invisible, erased, you can come back. You can be real again, you can matter. And on Friday nights, when the bar filled with laughter and stories and brotherhood, Marcus Reeves stood behind the counter and poured drinks and listened, not as Phantom the legend, not as the operator from classified missions, just as Marcus, a veteran, a survivor, a man who'd fallen as far as anyone could fall and found that even at the bottom there were hands reaching down to pull him back up. And sometimes that was enough. Sometimes that was everything. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that second chances are possible, that heroes can be found in the most unexpected places, please subscribe to our channel. And right now, on your screen, you'll see another incredible story waiting for you. Click it, watch it, and remember, every person you pass on the street has a story. Some of them might just be legendary. Thank you for watching.